Happy Hour,
a podcast about breaking into the animation industry over a couple of drinks.
All opinions and views expressed in this podcast are solely our own and are not representative of the companies for whom we work.
my name is Garrett.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Katie. We are all feature film animators currently working at Disney.
Yes, so very excited to say that for today's episode, we will be drinking some Q and ales.
Great.
Thank you. Pause for reaction. So you might be asking, what is that? Well, it's a nice laid back, simple drink. It's just a nice, any ale of your choosing. And if you got some Qs that you're asking in the meantime, then you, my friend, are enjoying a Q and ale. And I'm enjoying mine today in a wonderful Hogwarts mug that Katie and I got last time we went to Universal Studios. We'll put a picture of it in the show notes, maybe.
What is the specific ale in your Hogwarts?
I am drinking Paulaner Hefeweizen from the Red Lion Tavern in the Silver Lake area. Yeah.
Well, the reason that we chose this pun for the drink is because this month's episode is our very first Q&A episode, otherwise known as question and answer. We, a little while ago, posted for questions from our listeners, and you guys certainly delivered. So we super thank you for sending us your questions. And we wanted to give a brief little disclaimer because since we are still very much in quarantine, the audio might not be so great, and we apologize for that. We are recording remotely. Ben and I are in Los Feliz, and Garrett's in Burbank, and we're on a video chat, so the audio is not as good as usual, but we still want to deliver you content. So thanks for tuning in.
But the information should be equally valuable.
The information is A+.
We hope.
Yeah, knock on wood.
Yeah, and if you are listening to this and we didn't get to your question, we actually got so many questions. We were super happy with all the questions we got that we're not going to be able to get through every single one. So just a big thank you guys. Thank you again to all of you guys for sending in questions. And we definitely want to do this again. I think answering questions is like pretty fun to tackle these things just because getting direct feedback from listeners, which is cool.
Yeah, for sure. We can, talk ad nauseum about any random little subject within animation, but it's when these, you guys send in specific questions, that's always really exciting. So we're going to kick things off with our first question is a fun, nice and easy one to, get things going. From @Mary_animates on Instagram asks, if you could have worked on any animated movie, young or old, which one would it be? Fantastic.
It's a really great question. I guess I can start. I kind of cheated with this one a little bit. I hope you guys aren't mad.
Excellent. Starting things off right.
Yeah, because the first one I thought of was 2D, and I can't draw. So I was like, all right, well, I should think of two. But the first one I picked for this was The Iron Giant, because I love that movie so much. It's one of my favorite animated movies, and I feel like it is almost a perfect movie.
Be in that, Garrett.
I was just gonna say, yeah, the big robot. The Iron Giant himself, I could have animated. But in terms of like a more like CG centric one, I thought Toy Story, the original, would be a really cool one to animate because it was like where it all began, and I just think that would be super cool to start off with that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Those are some good picks. Dang.
Yeah. For me, right away, Fantastic Mr. Fox came to mind. That was definitely the movie that made me want to do stop motion, and it was just, every scene was just a little feast, and I would have loved to have worked on it. And for CG, I think the biggest one, I'm going to list like 10 movies. The biggest ones for me were Up and Zootopia. I would have killed to have worked on the opening scene of Up, the opening montage, Married Life, and Zootopia. There were just so many fun moments. Like, I would even love to have worked on crowds of Zootopia because even the crowd cycles with all the different animals were so much fun.
Yeah.
And so unique. So yeah, those are my big three.
So close. You missed that one by what, like 2 years, 3 years? Yeah. Man, for me, I wish I came up with a better response. So I just went with like, but there are a couple different ones. If time didn't matter and was really good at 2D animation, I loved the Jungle Book growing up, the original 2D version one.
Yeah.
Obviously, would have loved to work on that. Another huge one that stood out to me when I was a little younger was Monsters Incorporated.
Oh my gosh, good one.
I was just, when that movie came out, it just blew my mind. I loved it so much. From the character designs, the story, everything together. I just was obsessed with it. So that was another big one.
Is there a character in the Jungle Book that you would have liked to animate the most?
Oh man, gosh, I gotta say. I mean, it might be the most obvious ones, but I think Shere Khan and Baloo would have been pretty amazing for sure. I always loved Baloo and Shere Khan.
Tiger
so
stripes.
Cool. Yeah, that maybe I would have on it in between. Maybe the deer then.
Well, for our second question, this question comes from @StalsArt. StalsArt. I'm not exactly sure how that's pronounced. But the question is, what are your animation workflows? What are some things you do to speed up your work?
Good question, Stalsart.
We apologize if that's not how it's pronounced.
So to begin with, I'm going to talk a little bit about just kind of the rough outline, overall the framework of my workflow, and I think for all three of us, kind of our workflows when approaching a shot. So to begin with, we see that we have a shot or run of shots assigned to us. We find out from a production person, or we see it in Shotgun or something like that. And then after that, with the brainstorming and stuff, depending on the shot, if it's applicable, we'll go and shoot reference, which as we actually said this in a previous Instagram post, it could be you actually acting out the shot, or it could just be you with your hand kind of like doing a bouncing ball thing to show like the rhythm of the shot, or anything, or gathering outside reference for yourself.
You could call in some friends if you have a shot with multiple characters and need help with that.
Exactly. So then after reference, we'll edit that down and have like a take or a few takes we like that we want to work from. So then we'll set up and organize our scene, which we might have done a little bit of that already during the kind of brainstorming and figuring things out stage. But this is where we'll actually go into Maya or whatever software you're using and probably put our reference on a reference plane. Sometimes people will just have the reference open outside of Maya and be looking at it that way. So that's totally fine as well. And we'll kind of like optimize things to make sure the scene is running about as fast as it can. We might be hiding some environments and stuff, and any of that sort of thing. And then we actually start blocking the shot. And this could be, we'll talk about this a little later, but it could be true blocking where everything's on stepped, or it could be kind of a spline blocking sort of thing. And then once we have something kind of recognizable. So then you go into spline, where you're putting everything on ones and getting, all the kinks and everything ironed out, while also implementing any notes that have come up. And then after spline, you go and polish the shot as much as possible. But that's basically it.
Yeah. Going like a little more nitty gritty into block, spline, and polish, and like what that means for me. Blocking for me is kind of this process of, I scrub through my video reference and I kind of keep an eye out for what are the most strong or key poses in the reference. And I might kind of be looking at some extremes where I definitely know that there needs to be a key there, which could be like if a character's walking, like when their heel makes contact and then when their toe makes contact during a step, or just any kind of poses I'll look for that I know are pretty noticeable or kind of hitting at the extreme. And I'm I don't know if you guys do this. I think you do. I'm sort of more of a hybrid spline person where I start in spline right away just because I like to kind of know what's happening in my curves. I have my graph editor open and visible while I'm blocking just to make sure nothing crazy is happening in there. I do a lot of flicking between those keys. So I have hotkeys set for previous key and next key. And I have my reference plane in Maya because that flicking actually helps me see what's happening in my reference and kind of tracking what is moving and how much. And polish to me is a matter of checking arcs and like putting an arc tracker on pretty major body parts like the hips and the nose and the hands, anything that is moving and noticeable. I'll be tracking arcs, checking new pops with that. And a lot of asking a friend to look at something and say, hey, do you notice anything that I should clean up? Because after a week or two of looking at your own shot, you kind of get fatigued and you see things. So I often ask friends for help. But yeah, those are kind of what block, spline, and polish mean to me.
I think you guys did an amazing job just going over the workflow, and I agree with how you guys do it. I think I'm the same way. Just to touch upon some things that speed up or that have speed up my workflow, just really quick points that help me. As one, this might be obvious, but learn to use hotkeys. Things like little things that seem stupid, but like Control S for save or Control Shift S, save new version. Or like Katie mentioned, toggling between frames, next frame, previous frame, all that stuff adds up to saving a lot of time. And if you can learn more of those, that's great. Another thing that both Katie and Ben touched upon are definitely explore different workflows. So if you're a person who typically blocks and stepped, trying out a spline approach might really, really speed you up. It did. I feel like I've kind of gone back and forth with like starting out blocked. I used to only start out with stepped keys. Now I'm more spline first because I'm faster that way. But then some instances, like there's shots where block first is better. So just experiment with different workflows that you're not used to, because you might surprise yourself. You might find a better, more efficient way of working. That's one thing. Also, be on the lookout for new tools like Animbot, EB Worldspace. Like, be on the internet looking for new tools that your software uses, because seriously, not only can it have a profound impact on your workflow and like the way you animate, but it can just speed you up so much. I mean, we all kind of like geek out about the latest tools and stuff. Like, it's so fun to find out different things to help in that respect. And the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of speeding up workflow is, this isn't really technical, but I think it's important to keep in mind that your thinking and planning should be like 50% of the work of your shot. So if you can avoid being in Maya as long as possible, or whatever software you're in, like if you can, like I almost challenge animators to like think of a shot like a dialogue shot, and for the first week, don't touch Maya. Like literally thumbnail or just do reference and try different versions of that, and then have a solid, really good direction to go. And then when you're in Maya, you're going to be like lightning speed because you know exactly what you want to do. Because we talk about this a lot, but like posing is so hard. Animating and touching the curves and all that stuff, it's like, that takes so long. So definitely keep that in mind as you go forward with your shots.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
All right, so for number 3, we have a fun one by Rachel_0310_1996, which might be a birthday, not totally sure. But it's what activities do you do that aren't physically animating that help you be a better animator?
That's a great question. I think the number one obvious answer is drawing. When you draw, you are studying posing, you're observing people and animals, maybe at the zoo, and picking up on quirks of behavior and learning about anatomy just through trying to copy or even sometimes exaggerate what you're seeing by drawing on the page. Other ones that come to mind right away are actually studying music. I think a lot of us have musical backgrounds, and there's something about being familiar with rhythm and syncopation, which I feel like I apply when I animate in a weird way, where I can just kind of tell that I want things to have a certain rhythm. And I don't know if you guys do this, but when I play my animation, I have this weird like track going in my head where I'm going like do 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 or something, because I know like how I want it to feel and what I want how I want it to hit. It's hard to explain, but I think I do kind of have like a weird musical track sometimes when I'm animating. And certainly if you're animating to music, it's helpful to be able to follow it. Just watching movies is great. You pick up on what's good acting, what's bad acting, learning about film theory and cinematography and composition, I think is really important and helps you think about your shots more in context and how do they support the bigger picture and the whole. All of that is super valuable. And then these are kind of, my next few are kind of more just spiritual things. I guess I don't know how to best describe it, but things like, I think meditation helped me be a better animator, because I don't know, it's sort of an act of self-care where I'm trying to, as best I can, shelve any insecurities I have and make my mind more focused. And I think that's just kind of a healthy practice that I know a lot of animators have. I think being or exercising and engaging in fitness activities is also helpful, because you're in touch with your body. Like, I don't know if this is weird, but I do it when I go running. Sometimes I think about body mechanics, and it's helpful to think about what is your body doing and then acting it out, and feeling it is another thing rather than just watching a video of it. So I do think fitness can help, and then just living your life and having relationships and traveling, basically creating experiences that you can draw upon in your animation later. Like, I can't count the number of times where I'm working on a shot or an animation and can refer back to some experience in my life. So it's so important that you get out there and cherish your relationships and friendships and have new experiences, because if you just sit on your computer all day and you never leave, like, you won't have those experiences to draw upon. Wow, I just really went on a long time. Do you guys have anything to add?
Really good.
Yeah, that's great.
You think podcasting has helped you to be a better animator?
Maybe so, actually. Kind of reflecting on, your own workflows and stuff, and
that's
being
true.
like, oh wow,
yeah, talking with you guys, just getting it,
and being like, oh, this is I know this is a good practice for an animator to do, but I know I don't do it very much. So the fact that we meet and talk about it as a podcast, I feel like there have been a few things that have helped there. And really, I mean, that's the cool thing about animation, right? Is that animation is anything, really. You never know. You could be animating like a warrior or an insect or a machine or a car or anything, super emotional stuff, super physical. So really, as far as what activities that can help you be a better animator, just about anything, as long as you're observant and are thinking about those things as an animator, going out and having drinks with friends and just watch your buddies and see what they're doing.
How do they pick up their mud?
And what weird little idiosyncrasies they have, or, that's kind of a cool thing. That's why one of the things I most love about this industry is that, really anything is applicable.
Yeah.
I just watch Ben's face through the Zoom, and I just learn about appeal.
Oh my God. Oh man. HR, but I also kind of like it. So I don't know.
You guys can't see him, unfortunately, so we'll just have
Thank
to
goodness.
trust
Just
Garrett.
imagine something appealing. We will not attach pictures.
No, I think you guys really hit on some really good stuff. I know for me, I just like love movies, and I like to use that as an excuse of me like learning animation better, but I just genuinely just like to watch movies and TV.
Yeah.
But it's true. You can even bad TV or bad reality show, not that that's bad necessarily, but you can learn about people and their reactions. I love watching reactions of people to different things. So, yeah.
Actually, that's a great example. It's awesome when we see like a really good TV show or movie. But one of my favorite things to do is to take one that is not so good, and then Katie and I will talk for hours about like, okay, how could this point have been like reinforced a little better, or how could we have been more emotionally invested in this character? And I feel like I learned a ton from that too. Just
have you
one of my
guys, maybe I'll cut this out, but have you guys seen the movie Cats at all?
Oh, no,
we haven't
not
watched
yet.
it now.
We should do a live stream where we just watch Cats and observation. It is a fascinating movie. That's all I'll say.
I heard, Ronnie from DreamWorks watched it, or watched like the first 15 minutes, and he was like, everything you think of when you see the trailer and stuff, it's like that, like turned up to 11. Like, it's not like, oh, the trailer misrepresented what's going on. It's like, no, it is that weird or weirder, and it
doesn't ramp up. It's immediate. It's not like a slow ramp up. It's like, holy shit, you're in the city, and there's 50,000 cats, and there's like songs, and like it's amazing. Yeah.
So now we are on to a very, what should I say? Juicy question.
Controversial.
Controversial. Whatever adjective you want to make it sound more exciting. That's this question. So we got this from multiple listeners, and the general gist of the questions were, is the animation industry really as bad as people say it is? And especially it seems like in the last, 6 months or so, there's been quite a bit of negativity about the industry out there. So we wanted to take a moment and kind of address that as best we can.
Yeah. And like Ben said, this is a really big question. I think part of the reason it came up is, I believe Janet Chan, who is was a Disney TV storyboard artist. She had a video about the challenges of that she experienced during the industry and why she quit the industry. There's also another YouTuber that is an animator who works at ILM, who I apologize, I can't say the name exactly right, I don't think, but it's Jean Denis Haas. And he came out with a video recently about the challenges of the industry. And I actually think I encourage anyone to watch the full video, when we can link to it in the show notes, but the first 10 minutes of his video is basically the industry sucks. He says the animation industry sucks. And he talks about the hard struggles of the industry, like overtime, the layoffs, and all the negative parts of the industry. But I encourage everyone to watch the full video, because his point is that every job is hard. Every job that you could have, anything worth pursuing is going to be hard. Nothing is easy. So it's about finding that thing that's worth it for you to go through those struggles. And like one of the things, just to give you a little more context as to his video, he talks about how in school, when you're learning animation, you're learning about principles of animation, squash and stretch, and filmmaking, and the art of it, which is super fun. And once you're at a studio working, that might be like 50% of your job. And the other 50% is the politics, or it's the, maybe you're not inspired and all that stuff. So there is truth to that, because honestly, we're in a job. Animation, it is a job. It's not like we're all having fun 100% of the time. And certainly it's very hard. And we've all, we talk about in our setbacks and rejections episode, we've all experienced a lot of hardships, and that doesn't even go through with everything. And it's hard for sure, but I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I've had very high highs, low lows, but very high highs. And I think all of us, it's no one's going to be able to answer this question fully because it's so subjective. We can give you our experiences, but in all these scenarios where you hear things online and hear people's experiences, definitely listen to them, take them with a grain of salt. This is other people's experiences, and you kind of need to experience it yourself to get a full understanding of it. But yeah, the reason we're doing this podcast is we want to inspire people. We want people to come into this industry because we believe in it, and it's certainly hard, but we're having good people come into the industry helps us all too, because that means, hey, you're a cool person and you're going to bring us all up. And, I've certainly met some of the nicest people ever in the animation industry. I mean, it's like people are super nice in my experience. So, but then there's other experiences where you don't meet nice people. So yeah, maybe you guys can kind of chime in here about what I'm speaking about, but it's a hard question, right?
I think that's all great and super valid that you said that. And I like that you said that, yeah, I listen to those videos where people are saying, the industry sucks and this and that. And because I think a lot of times, in both videos that you mentioned there are some really great points and some legitimate things that students should be prepared for and look out for. When they're entering the industry. That being said, we definitely we also want to acknowledge that in this podcast, generally we try to err on the more optimistic side of things.
Yeah.
And we have had, although we have, like in our setbacks and rejections episode, we do talk about times where things didn't really go our way, but we are very cognizant of the fact that in the grand scheme of things, we've been incredibly lucky and fortunate. So we wanted to put that out there and, say we recognize that. And I'm sure Katie has more to add. But one thing I wanted to say that I am so passionate about, and it goes hand in hand with this whole conversation, is that, there are so many things that are out of your control with, whether your dream studio is hiring or not, or movies get pushed back, budgets get slashed, studios move to different countries. You might get in somewhere, then you don't get the shots you wanted to get. Although I agree that most of the people we've dealt with, I think we've all been lucky and had very lovely people we've worked with. I'm sure there are supervisors out there who are maybe have a little chip on their shoulders and aren't the most pleasant to work with, and our heart goes out to you, who, if anybody's going through that right now. But I'll cut to the chase. But the underlying point I want to make is it's so important to decide for yourself why you're in animation. And I think the reason has to be because a large part of the reason has to be that you just love the process and craft of animating. Yeah. Because if you're saying, okay, I'm only going to be in animation because I want to work at Blue Sky, because I love the Ice Age movies and stuff, and that's the only reason I want to be an animator, then it's going to hit you so much harder when you have to work in some other field for a little, or some other, work at a commercial studio for a little longer. I'm giving these just as examples. I don't mean to take away from any, don't mean to prop up or take away from any studio. But I think it's so dangerous to put all of your hopes and dreams on having this dream scenario where you go to this one studio and work on a movie that makes all these people cry and stuff. It's great to have that as a goal, but if that is the reason why you're animating, I think all these difficulties and things that come along with the animation industry are going to hit you so much harder. Because I know, just speaking from experience, when I was at freelancing in New York a little bit, I was surrounded by wonderful people, but there definitely was a good amount of insecurity about, what my next gig is going to be. And And maybe we were on a project at the time that didn't have nearly enough time, and it was understaffed, and there was pressure to, do more footage than was reasonable. And that stinks, and it's not fun to go through that. But on the other side, I was also very happy and grateful to be able to be making a living doing animation, because I just enjoyed, like, even though it wasn't the best situation at times, I was like, this is really cool though. I mean, I'm making a living as an animator, and I enjoy when I'm actually in there posing the character and doing these things. So it's just something I'll wrap it up. It's not the most profound point, but I just think that first and foremost, you have to just enjoy doing animation, because yes, there are fantastic, wonderful things about the industry. Yes, there are super scary, super difficult things about the industry. So as long as you can focus on why you love it, and you have things that can keep you going outside of, even when job security maybe not be there for you, or you're not on the project you're most passionate about, you need something that's going to sustain you through that. And for me, I feel like that's just being in love with the craft and enjoy just doing this job for 40 plus hours a week. I kind of rambled on there for a while, but
it's a very complex question, which, like Garrett said, it's very subjective to answer, because people have different risk tolerances and kind of priorities. And what I would add to your guys' answers is just to kind of be aware that different studios, different disciplines, different fields like VFX versus feature animation versus TV animation have different reputations and trends. Like, my understanding, I've never worked in VFX, but my understanding of VFX is that sometimes the hours are worse and the pay can be worse, because I think VFX studios are more kind of victim to bidding wars, where they're bidding for work, which means that they agree to do the work for a certain amount of money, but they're competing against a bunch of other studios that are also trying to get the gig. So then sometimes VFX companies will commit to a lower pay just to get the job. And then a lot of VFX studios are not part of any kind of union. So paid overtime can sometimes be more of an expectation. And this could go for some animation companies as well, but I'm just kind of generally speaking about the industry. So I would say I feel like I hear more horror stories coming out of VFX than I hear coming out of like the big top 5 like character animation studios, or top 6. But and then TV is a very different culture where I think the deadlines are more aggressive. You get more footage though. So it's kind of hard because some parts of the industry is like comparing apples to oranges. But my main point is just there is a wide range of experiences within this industry. So I don't think it's fair to categorize the whole industry as sucking, but there are definitely parts that do, and it can happen in ebbs and flows.
Within a studio itself, there can be variation on a person's experience. Like a different crew can mean you have
Absolutely.
a great time, like a horrible time. So
yeah,
you're right,
absolutely true.
right.
Yeah.
To continue this thought, I would just say that I kind of have the belief that any and every industry kind of has the same low points of possibly facing layoffs, and hiring managers trying to get you for the lowest pay that they can, or things like that. But I don't think every industry has the same high points and the same perks that animation does, of of like fulfilling your creative potential, and how it stays fresh because you have a new assignment every couple of weeks or every month or so. And just your ability to reach people, reach an audience with your animation, I find so inspiring and compelling, and I'm so passionate about it. And maybe I'm naively positive, but when I compare my experience in animation versus my experience in live action TV and sort of my parents' experiences in medicine and that kind of thing, for me, the perks of animation are just so wonderful. I don't mean to diss medicine. I don't know why I brought that up. But
medicine?
For me personally, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is, like, it's true. People have very different experiences. I know some people that have had pretty smooth sailing where they went to school, they got an internship at one of the top companies right outside of school. That led to a job, and it was pretty smooth. And then I know others who had to work a job totally outside of the industry. And then they worked on their portfolio in Reel and took online classes while they were working a non-industry job. And they toiled in that for years. And then they got their first gig in commercials and gradually worked their way up, and then eventually moved into a temp animator position. And people have very different experiences. I would characterize all three of our experiences as pretty smooth and positive overall. We did have our setbacks, but overall we've had it pretty good. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the people in those videos, or the people they're kind of addressing in those videos, certain social media accounts we know of are maybe more negative. And I'm sure there's truth to their experience, but it's not, I can say honestly that that's not our three experiences, if you guys agree.
Yeah.
With a grain of salt.
No, I agree. And I just want to go back to reiterate what Garrett said at the beginning too, where I still think it's everything in life in balance, right? Where I still think it's useful to listen to even the most negative, portrayals of the industry, because it kind of gives you a clue, and you want to stay vigilant and what to look out for. And I think as an animator, the thing that will best serve you is to be very nice, but also tough, and really easy to work with, and passionate, and just a generally friendly person. But then also recognize that animation is a business, and there are business people, and there are things going on that are outside of your control, and that a lot of responsibility falls on you sometimes to stick up for yourself, and to, before you accept a booking, say, hey, I'm not working more than 10 hours. And if it is, then it has to be time and a half pay or something. And to know to look out for that stuff, it's just half the battle. I think you can have a much more positive experience just by kind of knowing the pitfalls of the industry and knowing how to do your best to avoid them. And of course, everything is situational too. Like if you'll take anything, you got bills to pay, that's totally fair. We understand. You can't always be super choosy, but so if I tried to summarize everything, I would say the industry, there are some very bad parts of it. There are some amazing parts of it. All three of us have been very lucky and have had a great journey so far, knock on wood. And I think the best you can do is focus on what makes you passionate about animation, and be pleasant, but stick up for yourself. And I guess I want to say as well, like there's no shame in if this industry is not for you too. Mm-hmm. If somebody's like in high school and is figuring out if they want to be an animator, or if maybe they kind of want to do something else, but just do animations and stuff on the side, that's totally fine too. It's like any discipline. It's not for everyone, that's for sure. But I think anyone can do it if they have the right mindset and put in the work.
Anecdotally, like I talked about this in Setbacks and Rejections. Like I basically decided the stop motion industry wasn't for me because the challenges of that industry I decided were too difficult for me. Like I thought that it was very stressful, the kind of freelance lifestyle that stop motion animators usually have to have, of lining up gig after gig and moving to different cities for different gigs. There have been multiple times where my stop motion animation friends are actively looking for work for months at a time. And that can be a reality for other parts of the animation industry, and it's very real. And for me, that's why I pivoted to CG. I just knew CG work was more consistent. And that was a choice I made. And it might be a choice that you make about the overall animation industry. Mm-hmm. So we definitely don't want to sugarcoat it. There are difficult parts, and you will make choices about how you feel about that. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely a reality, and it's a reality that we all three of us have dealt with and addressed. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge there are genuinely difficult parts, and you'll discover that and you might react to it.
And just one more quick thing to add about that is, yes, there are so many difficult parts about the industry, and you're going to go through a lot of difficult challenges and stuff, and it's going to be really hard, but there is absolutely nothing like showing your shot, to a group of people or to, online or something and getting a reaction, seeing people actually react, whether they're laughing at the shot or they're emotional from the shot. To me, that's kind of why I got into this, to filmmaking and animation in general, is we're moving people. And it sounds corny, but it's the highs are so high. When you get comments, you show in dailies or something, and people are like, wow, you really did a good job on your shot. And those moments are just super big highlights. So it's worth it. I think it's worth it.
It's well, I never played baseball, but it's
but it's just like baseball.
It's just hitting a home run or something, or it's the best feeling in the world. I played lacrosse and field hockey, and I've scored goals, so it's like that.
Oh,
but
man. Awesome.
I have a 3-year-old niece, and she knows all of the lyrics to the Frozen 2 songs, and when she sings the lyrics that I animated to, I can't describe that feeling. It really is the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, and we're just going on and on with this question, but
it's probably the longest question.
When I was working in commercials, somebody wrote to PSYOP this really heartfelt letter about, this is a downer and an upper at once, but they had a relative who was, so get ready, enjoy this. They had a relative who was in the hospital dealing with some sort of, sickness, and said one of the only things that were making them happy is they would see these goofy Cricket Wireless commercials we were doing with these little dancing blob monsters and stuff. And they're just hey, we just wanted to pass along. This is bringing so much joy, even though it's a silly little thing. This character dancing alongside of, more 4G LTE coverage than T-Mobile or Sprint. And that's so cool too.
Awesome.
And not that, that's necessarily the reason. Again, I still think, being happy just doing the craft, for me at least, is one of the most important things. But yeah, it is so cool. And you never know what you're doing might touch someone in some way. It's kind of icing on top.
I thought Ben was going to talk about when he animated this Archer character.
Archer.
And there are all of these comments of guys talking about how hot she was. Wait, what was the game she's from?
It's Clash of Clans.
Yeah, we're going to have to post this.
No,
it's like a slow-mo shot of this Archer character releasing an arrow. And then there was like a string of comments where guys were talking about how sexy she was.
That was amazing. Yeah, I was not expecting that. And I was like, hey, that's why I do it. For these guys.
Turning on a bunch of anonymous internet guys.
Hey, whatever floats your boat, right?
That's right. Yeah, good times. All right.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, I think we can put that one to bed now.
Next question. This one I think will be pretty quick. From @LYC Arts. Could you get into the industry purely off of your work with no art degree?
I'll take a moment to answer this. Yes. We do have a good, I think, Katie, you should do the caveat since you were the one who thought of this initially. But generally, yeah, no one cares. Like I said, Katie and I technically have master's degrees in animation. I think out of the close to 70 animators at DreamWorks when I was there, I think maybe 2 people knew that. And then at Disney, unless any of the animators are listening right now, I would say 0 of them know. So, yeah, it's all about your reel.
Yeah, I mean, there are even directors. I think the Bancroft brothers didn't graduate from college and they have high school degrees. So they definitely didn't need art degrees to reach the highest level of animation. One was a director and one was an animation supervisor and have directed other projects. So definitely not a requirement. As we have said pretty often in the podcast, your portfolio and your work is definitely the most important thing when you're applying to a job. But the 2 big caveats that we'll give about whether or not you need an art degree are, I'm pretty sure that a degree is very helpful, if not required, for you to apply and get accepted for an international visa in the U.S., especially because for a lot of the kind of entry-level programs like the apprentice program at Disney and other internship programs we know of, very often if they're international applicants, they are getting in on a student visa, which requires them to have been in school recently or currently in school. So that's a giant caveat for our listeners who are listening from abroad. And the second caveat is just if you eventually want to teach in a university, most universities highly prefer that you have a degree. So that's something to keep in mind if long-term you're hoping to teach.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move on to number 6. This is a question we got emailed to us by Jose Pablo. And the question is, we all know that in order to make good animation, you need to practice. It's like exercising. You need to animate almost every day. My question is if you know a special method to actually practice animation, like some way to increasingly grow and really learn everything you need in the best way, or most of it since you never stop learning. So yeah, the way I sort of interpreted the way that I interpreted Caviar. I sort of see that as how to work smart and not hard in animation. Like how do you what can you do to just keep learning in the best way?
That's a really good question, Jose.
Yeah. So yeah, I see what you're asking here. Like generally we've kind of mentioned practice, and chip away at your 10,000 hours. But what does that actually mean, practicing? And what I would recommend off the bat are doing specific things like maybe practice single poses and spend an hour or more copying a pose from reference or trying to duplicate a pose that you see in an animation. Because sometimes when we're doing key poses, it takes a long time to get the level of detail you need. Other specific exercises are little mechanics things like practice doing a head turn and tracking the arc of a nose during a head turn and making the head lead and the chest and hips follow, or vice versa, the hips follow or hips lead and then the chest and the head follow. Practicing a weight shift, very mechanical things, walk cycles. Just the more you animate, the more you learn, and try not to animate the same kind of shot over and over again. Don't just do a dialogue piece from the chest up that's dramatic and you keep going for the same tone or the same kind of shot. Definitely vary it up and challenge yourself. Practice using a prop. Practice a shot with two characters interacting. Just always kind of up the ante with your next animation and try something you've never done before, because you will keep learning that way.
Yeah. I think another thing, it's such a great question because, yeah, it's so easy to say, like, keep practicing. But it's like, okay, what, I can just do a million walk cycles, or like, even with drawing or something, it's like, oh, I can draw the same, like, creature or whatever, but like you're not necessarily learning and directly getting better. So I think a great thing too is to have, as you're animating or whatever, have very specific things you want to focus on. Be like, okay, so with this next shot I'm animating, I obviously want to animate the whole thing well, but I am going to focus on graphic eyebrow shapes for this one, so if nothing else, if the rest of my mechanics are a little lacking or they're more par of the course for what I usually do, I am going to look at reference. I'm going to look at, milk call drawings of eyebrows and eyes, and I'm going to look at cool illustrators who are really good at facial stuff and other great animated shots and live action. And I'm going to really try to understand the eyebrows in this shot and do a good job. I think that's a great way to slowly but surely build on your skill set. And this is something I want to incorporate more, even with my work. And yeah, it could be anything. And I kind of thought of this when I was reflecting on my experience with, talking with some of my coworkers and over past movies too, where they were like, I remember one, like in particular, I wasn't on the first Boss Baby, but a lot of the people I worked with at DreamWorks were. And I remember, since he didn't have teeth and he, was really gummy and had a bunch of, had really fleshy lips, a lot of them said, man, that was like a masterclass in lip sync, because we had to think about it in a way we never had before. And we tried to be really graphic, but really cartoony with it. And I feel like a lot of animators would say they got a lot better at lip sync just because of that movie. And I think you can have like mini versions of that, with each shot you do, where it's like, yeah, like I said, I'm going to focus on brows this time, or I'm going to have really beautiful graphic hand shapes, and really focus on how I can group the fingers nicely and have them fluid but still feel strong, and just kind of set those mini challenges for yourself with each shot, because obviously you're trying to do everything well, but it's so overwhelming to say, I'm going to focus on everything on every shot, even though you kind of are trying to do that. I think that's a good way. Just break it down into smaller things you want to improve on, and try to be as objective with yourself as possible. Like one thing, I'm trying to work on my facial animation. I think generally one of my strong suits is that I tend toward kind of more physical stuff, and I like getting a lot of physicality in my shots. And then because of that, I think sometimes I can shortchange the facial. So knowing that's something I now try to focus on in shots. So I think things like that can be a big help.
Those are really, really good things. I love having the idea of having a goal when you animate, like having, like you said, graphic shapes or whatever. And going back to what Katie said about how you shouldn't animate the same thing over and over again, kind of another aspect to that I thought that could help is kind of animate what scares you, like what you're really not comfortable with. Like if you're used to animating biped characters talking in kind of subtle shots, maybe you animate a cartoony quadruped shot, which sounds horrifying, probably first going to it. But I would argue that you're going to do a lot more work in planning that shot because you're so insecure about the mechanics. You're like, okay, well, how does a dog walk? Like, how do I do this? And you're going to look up videos. And I certainly, that's sort of how I try to approach learning animation, is like, what am I weak at? And then just do that thing. You're going to suck. You're going to suck so bad at it, but you're going to get, like, after you do that thing, you're going to learn more than you'd ever have learned by just doing the same comfortable thing over and over again.
Totally.
That's a great point.
Yeah. If you want more inspiration for like what exercises to try, just model your self-taught program off of the online schools, off of the exercises you're seeing coming out of internship programs and apprentice programs, which generally, I think a very common progression that I'll see is bouncing ball with a tail, a simple walk cycle, just legs, and then a walk cycle, maybe a pantomime and a dialogue piece, and just kind of make sure you kind of check those boxes of the most common exercises, a push and pull exercise, a lifting the box exercise. All of those things are such valuable exercises, which is why like so many programs include them. So just keep going.
So now for number 7, this is from @ClaireIngram_art. Do you have any advice on how to develop a portfolio while working non-industry jobs after college? Great question, Claire.
Really good question. I actually don't have much advice about this, but I can just say basically it's really tough because I've been in that situation, and finding a balance between working on your portfolio and not burning out from doing all your normal work in addition to working on your portfolio, that's like super hard and it's very personal, and you have to figure out a kind of a system that works for you. I know when I was working in games, I was taking a class at anim school and I could really only work on it on the weekends. And that kind of worked for me, where basically 40 hours a week I was at the game company. And then I worked a little bit on the weekend, or I worked like 16 hours, I think, on the weekend. So it was a lot. It was hard. It was messy. It was crazy. I learned a ton, but I don't have much in the way of like, there's no like way to just give you more time automatically. You just have to figure out a system that I think works for you. But I will say that finding out how you can do this will help you so much, because even when you're in the job you want at the studio you want to be, you're going to still be wanting to push your portfolio outside of work, I think, because it's going to take a while to get to a place where you're at, a studio you like, you have the job that you like, and that you're being creatively fulfilled. Basically everything is being fulfilled at your job. More likely than not, you're going to be at a studio and you might not be getting the shots you want, or maybe you want to get some other position or whatever. It's just the earlier you figure it out, the better, is my point. And so I think whatever it is you have to do, try to figure it out, and because it will benefit you throughout your entire career.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I kind of went through something similar when I was a PA and I was thinking about transitioning into animation. And I worked on my short film in CG on the weekends, and I wasn't shy about using my sick days and vacation days to work on it, because that's time that you're kind of allotted to have off. Hopefully your job gives you some of that paid time off. I think I even took unpaid time off sometimes to work on it, just to keep myself motivated and healthy and not burning out too much by working on it during the nighttime. And one big tidbit of advice I would give is make sure that whatever you're trying to do on the side is something that you're really passionate about and excited about. Because if it's a drag or it's a chore, then you can count on not doing it. It has to be something where that lights a fire under your belly in some way and keeps you going. for those times when it's tough. And the only other point I would make is just it's helpful to know of stories of other people who have done it and succeeded. So I know of plenty of people who also worked in production in jobs that they weren't creative, and worked on their portfolio on the side for even periods of time as long as 6 or 7 years. So you're not alone if this is something you're dealing with. And it's a marathon, not a race, like we've said before. And it can feel, you might have low points. You might have points where you even quit. But if you come back to it and you just kind of try to keep seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, you'll get through it, hopefully, and it will be rewarding.
Yeah. I think the best thing, like Katie said, it's a marathon. Just chip away, whatever you can do when you're working another job and trying to do extra schooling on the side or extra project on the side. Doing anything is so valuable. And, obviously I think it's great to set goals for yourself and say, I'm going to put in X amount of hours, but honestly, anything you're doing is better than nothing. And just take heart in that fact. I remember even when we were in school and feeling really burnt out and stuff, or pretty fresh out of school and trying to do classes on the side and stuff to learn more, we would say, okay, I have to force myself to open the file and set one key. And that would be it, and we'll say, okay, if we do that, we will consider ourselves a success for the day. Yeah. And I wonder if you can hear our cat scratching.
Yeah, our cat has been eating in the background. And so we apologize if you picked up on any of that. Also, I meant to say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, not a race. Whoops. I was going to call it, but I think we all know.
Sorry.
But I say that with the really small goals because just speaking for myself, I'll often set big goals and then become discouraged when I don't do it. Okay, I'm going to do a cool drawing every day and post it, and that, and then it just doesn't happen. And I'm like, oh, whatever. But I remember, like I said, when we were in school, just having those super, really attainable goals, okay, just open the file, set a key. We would usually end up doing more than that anyway.
Right.
Whereas I feel like had we said, okay, every day we have to work on it for 4 or 5 hours, we definitely would have skipped days and not have worked at all. So, I think keep your goals attainable. Kind of have, those 2 levels of goals, your overall life goals and stuff that are, the bigger things, and then those little things that will motivate you day to day or week to week.
All right. Moving on to question 8, coming to us from @JoseGranera19 on Instagram. Can you show us your student reels?
Jose, yes. Technically, we already have. Yeah. But we're not gonna call you out on it, Jose. It's okay. You can come to the podcast at any time and see. So I would say check out our, I believe in episode 1 show notes. Yes. We have our student reels on our website. And then if you're just interested in general reel information, I would say check out our episode with Guillermo Carriaga, where we talk about all things related to demo reels. So the information is there. Check it out, my friend.
I would also just add that we're all pretty easily stalkable if you just search our names in demo reels. And then you can probably trace the history of our work on Vimeo and YouTube.
There you go.
Yeah, find us that way. So here's an invitation to stalk all 3 of us.
Worry not at Jose Granera. You can find us everywhere.
All right. Number 9 from @Erkman7. How have you dealt with self-doubt when you didn't think your work was good enough? Fantastic question.
Good one.
Gosh, this is one of those questions which I think could be a whole episode, but I'll try to give some quick bullet points for ways that I've dealt with it. I think probably a big shift in my thinking, and it's very hard to do, and I'm still working on it on a daily basis, is to only compare myself to myself and not to others. The most damaging thing you can do is, constantly comparing yourself to others, because you have no idea the background that other people are coming from. You have no idea how often they're animating on the side, how much experience they have, what resources they had along the way. So it's just not helpful. And when you compare yourself to yourself, you can track your progress. You'll know objectively, okay, even though I'm not quite where I want to be, I'm still better than where I was a year ago. So as much as you can, try to divorce that. And I'm about to seemingly contradict myself, but my next point is, don't compare yourself to others, but you can. Something that I do is I track others' progress, and occasionally you'll find accounts online of animators who have kept every demo reel they've ever had. And for me, it's helpful to see a very senior animator and their first demo reel, just to kind of know, okay, everybody has to start somewhere. Everyone was amateur at some point. Everyone was a student. And just knowing that you still have a chance to get where you want to go, and it just takes time. I think that is a helpful reminder. So I know this kind of sounds like comparing yourself to others, but it's more like comparing it's more that you are understanding that it takes time to learn this, and everyone else takes time too. And I don't know if I'm phrasing this very well.
No, yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I like what you're saying, because definitely in past Instagram posts and in past podcasts, we have said it can be confusing, because we have said you need to be able to objectively compare your work to others' work. Yeah. And that's true. When you're going for jobs, you want to be able to do that. But, everything in life and in your career, it's all a balance, right? You want to, when you're feeling discouraged, that is not the time to start comparing yourself to everyone around you. For very practical reasons, it's good to be able to compare yourself to others' work to see okay, these are the skills I need to get this internship or job or whatever. But when you're feeling super discouraged, just look at yourself and see, okay, a year ago, I had only done this many animations. I, was struggling with this, but since then I learned this, and this, and my most recent shot or the shot I did, 2 shots ago was better than anything I did, a year ago. I say that because not every shot you do is going to be the best shot you've ever done up to that point. But I think it's, you have to know when to, compare yourself to others versus yourself. You got to know when to not look at everyone else's profile in Instagram and how amazing they are, and, just to focus on your skills.
Yeah.
So,
And for me, I directly combat self-doubt with action. I will say, oh man, I'm feeling really insecure about dialogue. So you know what? I'm going to practice dialogue on the side. Or I feel really insecure about my workflow and I don't understand this tool or how to do this. So I'm going to reach out to my mentor and ask my mentor for help on this and admit that I'm struggling. So try not to wallow in self-doubt and let it paralyze you. Try to have it motivate you and channel that sort of insecurity into your work, because the only way that you can get rid of that insecurity, honestly, is working. Sometimes I hate the weekends because it's so hard to shelve my shot on a Friday if I'm insecure about it. And the only thing that'll make me feel better is to keep working on it.
Yeah.
So I just say, don't pause. Just dive into your work and you'll feel better, because you know that you put in the effort and you put in the hours to get better.
And hopefully it's clear with, Ben and Katie's responses that this is still very much an issue for all of us, like self-doubt. And we want we want you to know, hopefully it's a comfort that like, you will never get over this. This is something that will take you forever.
That's a very good point. I think part of dealing with it is just making friends with those feelings too. And saying like, it's normal that I'm feeling this way. Everyone feels this way.
Yeah. And I would bring back Guillermo's point that he brought up in our demo reels episode of try to have another source of self-worth and confidence totally outside of animation that you can draw upon, where it's like, okay, I'm struggling with my shot, but you know what? Like, I'm a really good cat mom. Or like, I went for an hour bike ride today and like, that's worth something. And I, cooked dinner for my friends or whatever it is. Just your work is not your worth.
The last little thing I'd like to mention, and it might be stupid, is for me, like the little victories are things that I remember and that help me when I have self-doubt. Like I remember for Anim School, for instance, they posted my shot on their Facebook page. They said like, oh, this is the work that Garrett Lewis did. And it was like, and I felt so good and validated from that, just seeing that. And I know that's like, oh, like Facebook likes or whatever, but I was just like, okay, like I'm not doing that bad if they're posting this. And I think that can apply to a lot of things. If you're doing well in school, maybe your teacher gives you a comment or your friend reaches out to you and says like, wow, that was a really, really good job on your shot. Like focusing, remembering, and maybe even writing that down, like when those things happen and just being like, I am getting better. Like you guys said, tracking progress. I think that's good.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, yeah. One very like practical thing that you just mentioned is writing it down. And I will be honest and say I've kept a journal. Like I try to kind of write down my feelings, and somehow the act of writing things down makes you kinder to yourself, and you work through the tough struggles you're having. And what's really interesting too is when you read back something you wrote a few months ago or a year ago and you realize, hey, I got through that, even though at the time it felt like the end of the world or the most important thing that had ever happened to you. And then when you revisit it later, you realize, oh, I don't even remember what I'm talking about here. And it kind of puts it all in perspective in the bigger picture. So yeah, keep a journal and watch your own progress that way.
So big number 10 question. So this is from @AECH They're looking for advice for senior films or group projects in general. Very good question.
Amazing question. And oh my gosh, do I have a lot of thoughts about this. And I do think I would love to at some point do a podcast episode on like films or something like that. But I'll try to make it really quick.
Let us pause for a second.
Yes.
Our co-host, Garrett Lewis, just recently posted his short film Brush. So you could not be asking a better person than this guy right now. So first of all, let us give Garrett another, Katie just gave one, round of applause. Congratulations, Garrett.
Thank you very much. I'm doing the horn because it's deserved.
It is deserved.
It's quiet.
There you go. Garrett, write this victory in your journal tonight.
Yes.
All right. Amazing. Thank you for that. But yes, I would love to do like an episode on, film tips, but to kind of simplify it, super simplify it, I would say the biggest piece of advice I have for senior films or group projects is just keep the film as small scale as possible, meaning limit your amount of characters, your environments. If you can do one character, one environment, like one prop, I know it sounds crazy, but just limit yourself to as few things as possible, because the more characters you have, the more environments you have, it's exponentially harder to get the thing done. And you limiting yourself will actually help, I think, make the story better, because you're going to find creative ways to, make it work. So I definitely think that's, if you can take one thing away, small scale, small scale, small scale. And then I would say also, second thing is try to rely on as few people as possible. Like ideally you could finish the film if other people left for whatever reason. So try to do that. I know that's hard because there's so many facets to films with like rigging and texturing and everything, but if you can do that, that's great. And I mean, I have a ton of more to say on this, but those are the two big things. But
that's great. Garrett has already said it, and I'll just reiterate it. Quality over quantity. Be mindful of scope. We heard it when we were students, and we didn't listen to it, and then we paid the price. It happens to everyone. Simple, simple, simple. I'm reminded of one of my favorite Pixar shorts is Jerry's Game, which is like the first Pixar short. It is one set. It is one character playing two characters, and it's amazing. Yeah. And that's a fantastic story, so you can't argue with the fact that simplicity can lend itself to an amazing story. Please try to go that way, because you'll have so much to, as we know, just from being animators, you can spend a whole day on a character doing a quick expression change or something. When you extrapolate that over a whole film where you're trying to model, texture, animate characters, do the whole environments, everything, do yourself a favor. Please go simple.
Yeah. I mean, do not expect to be able to make a short film at all on the scope of any of the shorts that the major studios have done. Recognize that those shorts have crews of like 50 people that are experts in their fields and quite possibly cost millions of dollars to make. So do not have that expectation going in that you're going to do anything on that scope. And if you see student films coming out of various colleges, pay attention to the credits list. If it's a student film that was made from one of the top colleges in France and the credits list has like 20 people, know that it takes those 20 people to finish the film versus a simpler student film that has 2 people. Maybe that's what you should go for if you only have 2 people to work on it. So very much keep in mind what's realistic. Know that every 10 seconds you add could be adding a couple weeks to a month of work. It's just, we can't reiterate enough how important it is to limit the scope. I totally fell victim to it. I made a short film, or I planned on making a short film that was over 4 minutes long, had 4 characters technically because they aged and water, they were fishing, and I did a 2D fishing line. I went way too complex. I needed effects and lots of animation. So we just can't convey enough how important it is to limit the scope.
Yeah. And another thing we wanted to say is choose your partners carefully. That might be an obvious one, but creating any sort of short film or anything, it is an incredibly intimate, intense experience. Yeah. So please make sure it's people who you feel comfortable with, people who you would feel comfortable having an argument with, because part of like any sort of creative endeavor is being able to disagree gracefully with other people, and to be able to work through that. And if you have a disagreement, that it can just be about the disagreement. It doesn't have to call into question your friendship or your respect for the person or anything. It can just be about the work and localized to that. So that's, another big thing. Maybe it's best to do a senior film with someone who is not your best friend, because there's way too much like personal, relationship, personal factors going on there. So you want someone who it can be a little more objective with. So again, obviously everything's case by case, but these are some some things to very heavily consider. We'll put out there.
The last piece of advice I would give is just to consider the importance of your film versus kind of how that film will serve you when you're job seeking. Like, if you know that you need to get a job as soon as you graduate, I would just think heavily about, okay, how can this film serve my portfolio? And maybe, I know it sounds terrible, but maybe kind of shelve your like auteur instinct to be like, this is my like very personal project and I'm okay going super experimental and avant-garde with it. This sounds terrible, but I just, my main point is just like,
don't think you're an artist.
No, I just,
just kidding. JK.
I just think it's an important consideration. If you're going to be putting months or years into a project, it's worthwhile to consider how that project will serve you on the job hunt.
Yeah. Very well said. So for question number 11, this is from Uma via email, directed at our very own Katie Lowe.
Ooh.
Oh.
I feel so honored.
And I feel so slighted. But just kidding. You mentioned earlier in the podcast that you've been able to experience working in different departments in the pipeline throughout your career. For example, story, lighting, editorial, animation. Uma, good job. You've been listening very closely. Yeah. And then Uma asks, what has each of these experiences taught you and how have they helped you in your journey to become a CG animator?
Wow. That's a great, very specific question. Thank you. What I would say is story and editorial taught me to kind of contextualize my animation and very much keep an eye on the big picture and not get lost in my own specific shot, but make sure I'm paying attention to how is my shot serving the story overall. So maybe I have a simpler shot and it's not the right moment to make it something big and broad and elaborate. And it really is just supposed to be a simple, quiet moment that serves the story. Because I think as animators, it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of, oh, I have to make this shot the craziest, most elaborate, most animation-y shot that I can make it. But it's not.
Ooh,
oh, we think I heard a firework outside.
Hey.
But continuing on, it's easy to fall into that trap, but really you do need to take into account the context, the character's arc, and keep all of that in mind. And you do appreciate kind of the evolution of a story when you have exposure to seeing how it's brainstormed and even how it's recorded. And you do have this sense that everything in an animated movie has been decided specifically, like every piece of dialogue, every sort of camera angle and that kind of thing. So I think it helps you, contextualize your shot and just kind of have appreciation for the film as a whole. And my experience in the lighting department, what I learned in lighting was to think about how the color and amount of lightness and darkness can tell the story just as much as the acting, just in what kind of feelings they evoke in the lighting and cinematography of a shot. Also, funny, the lighting department trained my eye to catch things like penetrations, because lighting is sort of the last line of defense for little mistakes. So I kind of learned to do this thing that my lighting or head of lighting used to do, which is I learned to kind of look at one character at a time, one quadrant of the frame at a time, and just look for any little mistakes I can, checking all of the hand contacts, the feet contacts, anything like that. And when you focus your eye does get better at catching little penetrations and things. So that was kind of a funny thing that was sort of a side effect of being the production person and lighting. And I remember I actually had a moment where I was in a room with like all of the supervisors, including lighting and environments and the layout soup, and I actually caught a penetration that nobody else caught, and I was very excited that I spoke up. And I was like a lowly little PA at the bottom of the totem pole, but it was a very proud moment for me. And the last department, actually there are two more departments I worked in. Wow, I worked in a lot. I also worked in the effects department, and gosh, if anything, I just learned to appreciate the work of other departments and seeing how all of these departments really add up to the whole of conveying the story. So effects was great because I learned how important it was to collaborate with the effects artists and how much it really helps just the overall process to reach out to the effects artists and let them know what you're planning. And I actually had a shot as an animator where Elsa was falling through the sky and crashing into the ocean in Frozen 2. And what I animated was technically faster than possible in gravity, and the effects artist simulations were based in real world physics. So like they couldn't match my animation. So we had a lot of back and forth, and I knew to kind of work with them because I had already been in effects as a PA. I'm kind of droning on here, but it's all kind of just adding up to like being appreciative of other departments and knowing that everything helps convey the story. And this goes for tech anim. This is the last department I'll mention that I worked in. And tech anim at Disney is like the cloth and hair department. And they also actually do a ton of silhouette work, which you might normally attribute to the animator. And they'll make cleaner sort of like creases in the neck or armpit areas. They might clean that up if the rig can't support it. And I feel like tech anim helped me appreciate frame by frame animation and making sure that every frame was clean, every frame was graphic in some way. Because when I was in tech anim, that was Wreck-It Ralph 2, and Ralph as a character was a super graphic character, and they were always paying attention to how can we make sure that he stays cubic and doesn't become too organic and, and that kind of thing. So yeah, tech anim helped me appreciate, like, we're going to single out a frame of animation and clean it up. And again, all of it adds up to tell the story, how the cloth moves from the princess dresses, anything and everything helps convey the story. So that's a long-winded answer, but it really does all help me.
Yeah, that's great.
I have a quick follow-up, not to keep this question going, but I'm just very curious, like, Katie, I know like animators, their biggest interaction with production is oftentimes like, okay, like we have a deadline, right? And the production's like, okay, this is your deadline. And it's kind of that back and forth about when a shot is due or whatever. You are in a unique position to have been in that side of it, knowing like, you know, you will tell an artist their deadline or you'll kind of be responsible for that or whatever. Do you like, how is it being on the other side of that? I guess.
That's a great question. And I feel embarrassed that I didn't even think to like address what it's like being a PA versus an artist. But I would just say, having been in production, I valued communication with my artists above all, because I was always happy to give more time for someone who needed more time if I had ample warning. What was hardest was feeling like I had to chase down someone or they were avoiding me. And so I've taken that into my career as an animator by being very consistent with communication and very vocal about needing more time early on, or even if I do need to ask for more time fairly last minute, being very apologetic and thankful if I am granted more time. And I guess the biggest thing is just learning the value of communication with production, and taking that into my career as an artist. Also, I think it's easy. The last thing I'll say is I think it's fairly easy for artists to assume the worst of production and assume that they want you to hit your deadlines no matter what, and they don't care about the quality of the work or anything like that. But having been in production, I know that everyone wants to make the best film they can. Very often production people are just the middlemen. And if they are saying, hey, like, we need you to show, or hey, like, are you going to hit this deadline? Very often it's just somebody who's being the middleman for their superior. So I've also learned just to be more empathetic towards production in that regard. All of that.
Yeah. Gosh, that's all so great. That's a huge thing. I feel like other animators and I would always kind of chat with each other about if anybody was ever getting to it. It's such like a personal thing when someone gets like, when you're working on your animation and someone's like, hey, you're going to show, or are you going to do this? Like, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard not to be like, I will. And the fact that you're asking makes me feel like I'm already behind and I'm aggravated and stuff, but you need to stay cognizant of 99.9% of the time, the person who is asking you if you want to show, it's nothing personal. They're just doing their job. They don't care when you show. Like, from a personal perspective, they just have on their sheet that like, hey, this person was cast this. It should take roughly this amount of time. They're just trying to do their best. So the best you can do is be nice to them and, communicate early on if it's not going to happen, like Katie said, because they need to communicate that up the ranks as well. Everybody's just trying to do their best at their job. So you have to recognize that. And I love what you said about, just respecting each individual department. And I love the mindset of like, nobody really owns a shot. The shots are all shared by all the different departments. So that's great. I don't have anything else to add. I love, thinking, being in that mindset of that your shots are really not your shots. They're shots that you're sharing with other incredibly talented artists and incredibly talented, diligent production people, and, treat everyone as they're your equals, because they are, Yeah.
One little thing, just a little bit harking back to the confidence question, is one practical thing I took from production into being an artist is just the knowledge that as a PA, I never stayed up all night thinking about whether one artist was going to hit their deadline.
That's a great
was
one.
very much just tracking the team as a whole, very much aware that some people were going to be faster, some people were going to be slower. There were specific challenges we were facing as a team that we had never dealt with before, like a brand new character or a crazy sequence that had tons of action or anything like that. And very often when I'm worrying about my deadline as an artist, I think, you know what? I don't think my supervisors or my production supervisor are staying up at night wondering when I'm going to deliver my shot. So I actively remind myself of that fact all the time.
That is such a great point, because I think that's the first place you go to as an artist. You're like, oh my God, I have to tell Katie I'm going to be a day late. She is going to be chatting with all of her friends, laughing about how I'm such a piece of shit, and like can't hit my deadlines. And that's not it at all.
That being said, communicate.
Yes.
And let them know if you're going to be a day late, but don't worry about it.
Turns out all of your supervisors have been up at night thinking,
Yeah. Like I can't believe. Yeah.
Cool. That was a really fruitful question. Good job.
That was a good one.
Okay, so moving on to number 12. I believe this is also from Uma through email. I'm starting a 1-year course in 3D animation and visual effects, but I also really enjoy the storyboarding side of animation. Let's say that after that year, I end up wanting to pursue storyboarding. Do you think that switch would still be possible? So I guess the question is it okay to switch from 3D animation stuff to storyboarding? Is it too late to switch?
Uma, that is totally okay. That is not as big of a switch as you're probably thinking in your head. I mean, yes, it will come with its own challenges, and it'll be, I'm sure will come with its own insecurities and, difficulties, but you can totally do that. And there are multiple. We are going to talk about 3 people we know who have made that switch after working as professional animators for multiple years. But even if you're just in school, I mean, that's nothing. That's totally okay to make that switch. It's totally okay to make that switch if you're studying medicine and then want to go into storyboarding or anything. The only thing that would make that impossible is your mindset, I think. If you're open and willing to do the work that it takes to change into another discipline, the sky is the limit for sure. So like I said, just to name a few people who have successfully done that. A lot of people listening to this podcast probably know who Alan Ostergar is. He's an amazing animator who was a trainee at Disney and then became a full-time animator at Disney, has one of my favorite Zootopia reels I've seen out there, and his Moana stuff was amazing. And definitely was on his way, I think, to be a supervisor or really, high up in animation. But he decided to make the switch and go into story and became a story trainee at Disney and is now a storyboard artist on Raya in The Last Dragon, the movie that all 3 of us are currently oh my God, hiccuping. That all 3 of us are currently working on. So that's a great one right there.
And he did that by he literally went to figure drawing every week and every session, which is at least 2 times a week at Disney. From his first week, he did figure drawing and just got very strong at drawing. Yeah. And then there was kind of a slow down period when they postponed the Ralph release date for Wreck-It Ralph 2, and he took that time during the slow period to really work on his storyboarding skills and strengthen them, and worked and got feedback from the story artists at the studio. So it's not something he did without putting any work into it, but he was able to make the switch.
Yeah, he put a ton of work into it for sure. Actually, I remember we were going to hang out with them one night, him and Cynthia, and then we were like, oh, we're kind of busy, we have this going on. And then they were like, oh, actually that works out because Alan's busy working on his story reel.
Yeah.
And that was when he was already a very successful animator. So yeah, it's totally up to you what you're willing to put into it. Like I said, it sounds stereotypical, but the sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want to do. Aside from famous, handsome Alan, we'll give other examples. Not that these people are less handsome; they're equally handsome or more. But Ken Morrissey is another one. I think he was a storyboard artist on Wreck-It Ralph 2.
Yes,
and is storyboarding at Disney TV right now.
I believe so.
Yeah. And he was a really great animator at DreamWorks for a long time, right? Do you know how many years, Katie? No, we don't know how many years, but multiple years. Definitely multiple years.
But awesome work on Kung Fu Pandas. And
he did the amazing shot, I think he did, of Master Oogway blowing out the candles in the first Kung Fu Panda, which so cool, so awesome. He was obviously incredibly talented and, decided to go the story route. And then another one is Marco... I'm going to say his last name wrong now. I know. Marco Regina. Do you know Garrett?
Regina?
Regina, or
Regina.
I don't know if that sounds too like American. I don't know. Marco, Regina. He's a really talented, awesome animator at DreamWorks. And then recently he's been, or in the past he has done a little bit too, but he's doing more story stuff recently where he's just working there as a storyboard artist. So we just wanted to give you 3 really concrete examples. I'm sure there are many, many more of people who are working in TV or commercials or a number of different media types that, were animators or were writers or were in totally different, disciplines and then became storyboard artists. At the end of the day, what any director or studio or anybody is going to care about is your portfolio, what you can do. Can you help tell the story that they want to tell or sell the product they want to sell? And if you can do that through your storyboarding skills or your animation skills or your modeling skills, there's work for you out there.
Yeah. I would just be cognizant of the fact that like any discipline in animation will likely take years to get to a level where you're hireable. So just be aware of that fact that if you do pivot, be prepared to take on additional training, additional schooling, or self-schooling. I'm sure you're aware of this, but it's not going to be an instant switch that you can just get hired, and you'll need to put in the work. But yeah, if you put in the work, the sky's the limit, as Ben said.
And your previous skills will probably help in your whatever you're pursuing. So if you're doing 3D animation, that's going to help a lot with storyboarding.
Okay, so question number 13 is from, it's a great name, at Miro My Boy. Fantastic, well done. I wonder if you have any tips for someone trying to break into the animation industry being an adult, meaning changing industries / coming from a different educational background. It would be cool to hear if you know of such examples of people who have succeeded in this. That's a good one to follow our last one.
Yeah, it's very related to the last question. We definitely recommend that you listen to episode 1, where all 3 of us talked about our backgrounds and discussed kind of at length how Ben and I used to be pre-med, and then we switched disciplines and we decided to go into graduate school. And also episode 3, where we talked to Paula Benedicto Martinez, who was a trainee and apprentice with me at Disney. And she came from an engineering background and totally switched. So kind of the big ways that you would do this are looking into the online schools that can teach you animation at home or while you're working a job. Online schools that immediately come to mind include Animation Mentor, Anim School, iAnimate, Anim Squad. I don't know if I'm forgetting any. Schoolism for more Viz Dev stuff and that kind of thing. So you can definitely pursue schooling while you're working in another industry, or if you just want to take some time off to do school. You can look into brick and mortar schools and look into MFA programs like Ben and I did, going to the SCAD MFA program. And in one of our future episodes, we are going to discuss the differences and pros and cons between online schools and MFA programs at length. But to get to the second part of your question, examples of people who succeeded in this, listen back to episode 1. It feels weird to plug ourselves, but Ben pivoted from graphic design. I pivoted from being pre-med and from live action television at NBC. And then we know some friends. I feel like maybe the heart of this question is like, okay, what if I'm in my 30s and I want to start animating, or like I'm already an adult, I'm in my 40s, who knows? And I would just say it's never too late. No, like I said in the last question, it might take a few years to get to a level where you can get hired as a professional, but it's never too late. We have a friend who, when we went through our MFA program, he was 30 and we were, I guess, 23. So it's really never too late. You just have to be okay with kind of hitting the pause button for a little bit. Maybe you save up money so that you can put all of your energy and focus into your schooling and your training. Do you guys know of any other examples off the top of your head?
That's a big one. I mean, as long as financially it's viable for you to, take a pause and, switch up trajectories, or if you're able just time-wise to take classes outside of what you're doing, there's no limit. No studio is going to say, oh, this person's 50 years old.
Yeah.
But the reel's amazing. We don't want them because they're too old. That's not going to happen. They're going to say, okay, we need people. This person's reel is amazing. We're going to hire them. There's no conversation about how old someone is or what they did previously. Yeah. It's just, what you can bring to the table and your reel. So yeah, I think it's great that you said that.
It might even give you an edge and make you more memorable. Like, I think, didn't Guillermo say in the Demo Reels episode that he remembered meeting someone at CTN who was like maybe in his late 30s or 40s, and he was pivoting from being an accountant?
Yeah.
I think he said, so more power to you if you want to make the switch.
And I remember working at DreamWorks. One of my coworkers was Joe Chong. Gosh, I'll have to verify with him, and maybe we will update this recording. But he worked in some sort of crazy, he worked on airplanes and was an engineer in some respect for did something with that. But it was so intense and so clearly something you would have to go through a lot of schooling to, be able to have the job that he had. And then he decided to pivot and go into animation and is doing awesome stuff now. So trust us, there are no shortage of people who have done just that, gotten into animation later on. So don't worry. If it's what you're passionate about, you can totally do it. I don't care how old you are. If you're in your late 20s and you're like, oh, I'm a little past college, it's too late. Or if you're in your mid 50s, that's totally fine. If you have the financial capability to study those things and, do it, opportunities are there.
So number 14 comes to us from @Clavita Fernandez, and she asks, which one's better, online courses or animation schools?
Oh, man.
Question of the century. We are actually going to do an episode on this. We have one planned, but the whole stay at home, the quarantine stuff has put a little bit of a wrench into it, but we will do a episode on this. we can give you sort of a little summary of it, but it really depends, on a bunch of factors. And it depends if you're looking for, if you want to be a storyboard artist or you want to be an animator, it might be a better situation to go into an online course because it's more specifically catered to that. Whereas if you go to a brick and mortar school, it's more general. There's so much to this though too. It's if you do care about the degree, if that's important to you, whether you want to get a visa in another place, that could be important. So that is a consideration where maybe a brick and mortar is better. So it really depends. And I would like to hear your guys' take on this too, but I feel like the kind of rule of thumb, not totally rule of thumb, but is if you know 100% what you want to do, maybe it's better to go with the online route from a reputable online school, just in terms of cost effectiveness. Because certainly if you have all the money in the world, I mean, it's amazing to be able to go to a school, meet people. I mean, and certainly online, brick and mortar schools aren't just about animation. It's about meeting people, socializing and networking and all that stuff. So it's a complicated question. We're going to cover it more, but that's sort of the rule of thumb that I thought about, but
I'd agree.
I think that's exactly right. And I mean, people still listen to our other episode that we come out with in the future about online versus corner, but generally, I think that's basically it. Yeah.
All right. Last question, number 15.
Oh man.
This is was asked by @Rachel_0310_1996. Something you wish you knew earlier in your career. Oh yeah, I guess this is like, what's something you wish you knew earlier in your career? And really quickly, we did have an episode about things we wish we knew, but that is, I think, episode 2. So definitely take a listen to that.
And that was like specifically for things we wish we knew in school.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, yes.
So definitely check that out. But, aside from that, one of the main things I would say is I think there's a huge push while you're in school or early in your career to and we talk about this too, with like comparing your reel to other reels that have been successful. And there's a big push to kind of conforming to a certain standard that is very marketable. And I think that's really valid and really valuable. But I think within that, if you're able, I would say really focus on what you're passionate about. Whether that's like, okay, I'm going to try to have a well-rounded demo reel, but I, in particular, really love super crazy, physical, heavily choreographed shots. Then have a reel that's kind of, heavy in that. Or like, okay, I'm going to have a well-balanced reel, but I also just really love creature animation. Try to err more on that side. It may sound kind of obvious, but I definitely went through my entire schooling career without doing this. And I kind of spent the whole time just doing like, okay, what are shots that are similar to shots on other people's reels that have had success? And that's kind of what I spent my time doing, which was okay. But honestly, I think you can get so much out of, having, like I said, I'm going to say it another time, a well-balanced reel, but try to also focus on what is uniquely you or what uniquely speaks to you.
Great.
For example, I if you really want to do some creature animation stuff, I would have a lot of that on there because I just feel like there's this weird tendency to, what you're putting out there will be what you end up getting then. If it's like, oh, I really want to do subtle stuff, eventually you'll find yourself getting cast subtle shots at studios and stuff. And basically what I'm cautioning against, I think, is just trying to tailor make this kind of generic reel that you're not super passionate about. And then you might get into your dream job, but then you're cast all these shots that are kind of similar to your reel, but it's not what you really wanted to do in the first place. And it's all a balancing act for sure. You want to be objectively marketable while also representing yourself. And that's a tough thing to do. But it certainly is possible. There's a lot of wiggle room in there. And I think that's one of the biggest, that's kind of a weird gray kind of, not super objective thing, but, I think that's one of the main things because I was definitely not focused in my schooling career on that. But I think it could be really helpful. And real quick, I'll give a specific example. I think, you guys know better than I do, the animator Murat, I think his name is. Yeah, Murat. He was at Disney for a number of years and just recently went to Pixar. And he had this beautiful reel, of all this really great, well-balanced CG stuff where it was... some action shots, some nice subtle acting shots, it definitely checked all the boxes. So that was great. And then he also had this fantastic, like simple stop motion test where it was like just this really primitive character animating at his desk. And you saw like he was getting a call from his girlfriend and she like got so mad goofy. Because super goofy because he wouldn't pick up the phone. But then he for a second he thought he heard the phone and then he just went back to animating. And it sounds really simple and it's super goofy and it is simple, but we'll link to this shot or his reel in our show notes. And I think that shot, just because it showed his particular sensibility and his sense of humor and what he was passionate
You
about.
can just feel how much fun he had while he is animating it.
And since it was something so specific to him, I think that really spoke to Disney when they hired him. And they were just like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. We got to chat with this guy. So again, I think if I had to super condense everything I was just rambling about, I'd say like, check all the boxes and try to do something that's uniquely you, like be marketable, but don't forget about what makes you you, and incorporate that into your reel if possible.
I would say for me, the biggest thing that I wish I knew earlier in life and not just like in my career is the difference between a fixed versus growth mindset. Because I grew up, I think all of my life, kind of believing that people were born with innate talents, and those talents and the level of skill you had were kind of fixed, and it was just like this God-given thing that some people were good at some things and other people were bad at other things. And I think that mindset was so dangerous because whenever I struggled with something, I felt like I had to quit and focus on what I was good at, even if what I was good at, I didn't enjoy as much as things I was bad at. And all those things I was bad at, I couldn't enjoy. And I got into a dangerous cycle of only enjoying things if I was good at them. And I will venture a guess that and there have been studies showing that women often fall more into the fixed mindset camp than men do, and men are often more in the growth mindset. Maybe it's different for animators as a whole, but there have been psychological studies which show that like when people are raising girls, they'll say like, oh, you're so pretty, you're so smart. And those kinds of compliments just feed into the growth mindset. Whereas when a boy like does well on something, I've read that like often they'll say, look, parents might say like, oh, you worked really hard, like good job. Or if they're struggling with a math test or something, they'll say, oh, if you just focus or work harder, then you'll do better. And there's something culturally that, and obviously both ends of the spectrum, I'm sure, experience both types of mindsets. But I do think that, at least for me, I grew up believing in the fixed mindset and I became very dangerously frustrated with anything that I struggled with. So applying this to animation, which is a discipline that takes years to learn, I wish that I had switched my mindset to the growth mindset faster, because I think that's part of the reason when I struggled during my internship at Leica that I decided to quit and pivot to production management, which I knew I was good at. Getting very personal here, but it's something that I think I would have benefited from earlier on in my career, is having the growth mindset, which is that practice helps. You can improve on anything, and you can always learn more, always improve. And it's definitely something that I apply with every shot, every day at work.
You guys both came up with amazing things. Amazing things. I agree with both of those things. One thing I wrote here, and this is for all the people who have parents that might not be supportive about animation because they don't take it seriously, is I wish I knew that animation is a valid, lucrative industry, and there's a ton of jobs, and it's really, it sounds like, I think a lot of people think, oh, it's animation, you can like just draw some things and like, yeah, like, but when you actually really get a job, you should, become a doctor or become a lawyer or whatever. But like, no, this is like, people make a living doing this. And I think back then I didn't know that really. And I think a lot of people still are kind of getting accustomed to that's like, it's a real thing. So that's one thing I sort of wish I knew. And I also, this is kind of going into what Katie said about the fixed mentality and all that, is like, I wish I knew that you don't, like, I think there's this maybe expectation that like once you're at your dream company or once you're in the job that you want to be, you're going to just, that, like, that's going to provide you all the learning you need. I think it's important to realize that you need to just keep your skills sharp, even outside of work, like always. You need to just constantly be improving, which is really, you know, it's hard, but I think it's what makes the industry so great too, is like we're always pushing ourselves. It's not like, yeah, like once you're an animator at a company, you're just, that's it, you're done, you're good, you know, like you have to keep pushing.
The last point that I'll add to this question is just kind of harking back to the question of, is the industry as bad as people are saying it is? And I think I wish I knew, and I think a lot of our friends wish they knew earlier on, that there are parts of the industry that are tougher than others. Certain disciplines, certain fields, certain companies might have a trend of abusive practices with unpaid overtime or low pay or kind of short contracts or stringing people along and that sort of thing. And it's very good to be aware of that when you're breaking in. And yeah, just knowing that going in, I feel like is so much better than getting surprised by it on the job. And related to this, I would also say that I kind of wish as a student or as someone breaking in that I had recognized earlier on when there was a dream I had that was no longer realistic for whatever reason, or like not a practical lifestyle. So an example I'll give about this is that like I loved the movie Fantastic Mr. Fox. And I had friends who wanted to be 2D animators on Miyazaki films. And like, that's why they got into animation. That's why I got into animation. But then there's the very practical side of that where you need to know like, oh, Wes Anderson has done 2 stop motion movies ever, and they were multiple years apart, and they both took place in England for shooting. And like, you can't build a whole career and lifestyle over Wes Anderson occasionally making a stop motion movie. And you can't build a whole career and lifestyle over moving to Japan and not knowing Japanese and potentially getting severely underpaid, which I've heard those 2D animators are. So kind of taking like a very close look at like, what is my dream and is it actually realistic or attainable? And this, oh God, this sounds so sad, but it's just kind of a practical reality check, I guess, to consider. And I don't want to say don't dream. And there's definitely part of me that like wanted to work on Isle of Dogs when that booted up. But yeah, it's just something to very seriously take a hard look at. Like, did you get into animation because you loved a TV show which is no longer active or something? Like, you're never going to be able to work on that TV show. That sounds so depressing. Can someone lighten the mood a little bit? I guess the very like short summary is just knowing that the industry isn't perfect. And
yeah,
it is a job working in the industry. There are going to be low points, and coming to terms with that, but then dealing with it. So
great.
Oh.
As abruptly as I can end that.
So now, tip jar.
Woo!
We could barely hear that, Garrett, but we liked it.
And Gigi
right.
is.
And Gigi is using her cat scratch in the background. All right. Okay, so for this one, we wanted to talk about planning and choreographing complicated shots, or really almost any kind of shot. But we're going to talk about the importance of possibly using just basic primitives to plan and choreograph your shot. For example, I know Garrett and I were both on How to Train Your Dragon, and with basically on any project you're on, whether it be a commercial or a TV show or feature film, game, whatever. A lot of times there are crazy complicated shots with, cameras flying around everywhere and or maybe it's a bunch of different characters and they're fighting each other or something. And somebody, I think one of our old animation professors said, really, animation is just a series of making decisions, right? And eliminating variables. And I think one of the most valuable things you can do is that when you have a super complicated shot, just use a very basic primitive to plan it out first. And I can speak from experience on multiple movies and shows. I've used just a basic sphere or a cube to plan out, say okay, the character is generally going to be here, and then they're going to take a couple steps and be over here. And then this character enters screen and does X, Y, and Z. And then that is totally something where maybe, depending, you wouldn't send it to the client or to the director, but it's something I would then take and talk to my supervisor about and say, hey, here's kind of a bare bones plan for the shot that I'm planning on doing before I actually get in there and start dealing with all the different controls in the rig. And it's a good way for you and your supervisor or whomever to get on to the same page, because really, I think that's one of the biggest time wasters, regardless of what field you're in animation, is just having a different idea than your supervisor or the director or the client. So it kind of helps things in it. Our cat is still scratching, so sorry if you can hear it. But the benefits are kind of two or threefold, really. One, it helps you break down the shot into simpler, beats or simpler bite-sized chunks that you can focus on. So when you're dealing with posing all the different parts of your character, you can still see it within the context of, okay, here's the overall choreography I was going for. Two, it helps you get onto the same page, like we said, with your supervisor or director and kind of figure out what you're planning for the shot. And three, I think it just makes things a little less intimidating and it gives you a little more sense of accomplishment early on, where you're like, okay, I did this kind of layout plus choreography pass and I feel good about it. I'm excited about it. So I'm going to work toward that as I'm blocking things out.
I would add 4. It's just faster. A lot of
that's a huge
characters and rigs that we work with are heavy, and they might have a lag in playback or they might have a lag in manipulation. But a sphere is clean 24 frames per second playback. Yeah. Garrett and I had worked on a ride, which was 60 frames per second, and that was impossible to get clean playback with the characters. So using primitives was extremely beneficial for that. Just practically, it can be way faster for planning.
For sure.
Great tip.
So we're actually coming towards the end of the episode, which is normally when we give our social media plug. So yes, please check out our Instagram, Animation Happy Hour. Please check out our Twitter, which is @AnimHappyHour. Check out our website, animationhappyhour.com. You can email us with questions or comments, animationhappyhour@gmail.com. Make sure to check out the show notes for this episode, which you'll also find on our website. And the last thing that we will plug is a brand new thing we just started, which is our monthly newsletter. So you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website. And basically what the newsletter is it will be released once a month on the 15th. And we will give a reminder about the most recent episode as well as a preview of our upcoming episode. And then a very quick little list of some fun animation links that we put together from the month. So this could be cool demo reels or a nice like upcoming speaker event, or maybe even job listings that we found. So you definitely want to sign up and check it out. I promise, I'm the one putting it together. And I promise that I will try not to include any spam. I just will genuinely pick things that I think are interesting and would interest our listeners. So please, yeah, we encourage you to sign up and check it out.
That's right.
Awesome. And you also include your favorite review of the month, which is a reminder to, if anyone wants to submit reviews for the podcast, you might be featured there. So definitely a plug to do that. So that about wraps it up for the Animation Happy Hour Q&A. This has been Garrett,
Ben,
and Katie.